When I first came to Rosary Hill College, before it really was the college, all I saw when I got off the bus at Main Street was a garden. There was a potato field stretching all across the 25 acres in front of that, facing Main Street, and then behind that was a row of corn, and then a beautiful 10 feet high row of white and lavender and purple lilacs. It was a beautiful thing, but it completely gave privacy to the people who lived in the house. So this is what I saw, and this was the building, and I came with my little bag because I had all the art materials for making the sign that would face Main Street that would say, Rosary Hill, a college for women. And that first time, I was to paint the sign and put it up. Now, the building itself is in a style that is neo-Renaissance, in the sense that it is a copy of the Renaissance style, which then the next century went over to England, and then finally in the next century over to the States. The house was originally built in 1910, and the Crouches lived here for 25 years. And it was then, after 25 years, that they sold the building to George, the Mr. and Mrs. George Waite. And they lived here then until 1946, when they negotiated with the Sisters of St. Francis to buy the building and to start a college. They were perfectly willing, and the arrangements were made, and Sister Gonzaga, who was the academic dean, already registered students for that first year, the opening of the college in 1947, because we had the charter from the New York State Board of Regents. But they changed their minds, the Waites, and they said no, they didn't think they would sell the building. Well, it was a difficult situation for Sister Gonzaga, who was the academic dean, because she had already registered students at Stella Niagara Normal School, from which this college then grew. And she had to tell the students who were registered to go to another college, to Dieuville or to Nazareth in Rochester, wherever else. But there would be no opening that year. Well, events took a turn that was satisfactory for us, because Mr. Waite died the following winter, and as a result of that, Mrs. Waite was willing to negotiate, and then the college, she was willing to sell the college. This is the entrance that the students used as they came to the college that first year, and for several years thereafter. And it is interesting to see how the Crouch Mansion, was then adapted by the Waites, was then adapted by the Sisters of St. Francis for a first-year college. Now, when I say first year, that means in the first year we had only freshmen. And they were an energetic group and very much concerned about being pioneers. And they are the ones who wrote a school song, decided what the administration of the student government would be, and all of those interesting things. It was a challenge for all of them. So as we go inside, we will see how the adaptation was made from the Waite house to a classroom building, an administration building, and also student center and cafeteria, all in one building for several years. As I said, the Waite Mansion adapted itself very well to the needs of this young college, because here on the left of the foyer is the library, which is the academic center of the college, and on the right is the chapel, which is the spiritual center of the college. And those two centers were actually the heart of that beginning college so long ago. Now, directly above the chapel are three major bedrooms, and those three bedrooms were the initial classrooms for the freshman class as they entered. And then directly above this foyer is one bedroom that served as the joint office of the president of the college, Mother Alphonse Kempschoff, and the academic dean, Sister Gonzaga Miller. And directly below this is what the Waites called a Rumpus Room. And that served very well as a cafeteria for the students and also a student lounge. And off the cafeteria are two other very small rooms, and those are used as classrooms. And we'll talk about that, and we'll see them a little bit later. Now, we came in, and I forgot to tell you that, we came in this door, which is the back door of the college. And the front door leads out on the terrace, which has a beautiful view. And if we were living at the time of the Italian Renaissance, we would have called it a belvedere, which means a beautiful view. So let's go out on the terrace and see where the first graduating class actually received their diplomas in this beautiful view. And this is the terrace where the first students graduated. And seated on the terrace were the faculty, and in the center was the bishop, who awarded the diplomas, the certificates, to the students as they came up the stairs in their cap and gown. And then seated below on the grass were their proud parents, their mothers and fathers and friends, watching their daughters graduate. Beyond that, if you will look out to where those cars are, originally that was a beautiful lake. We called it Fatima Lake. There was a pier and a rowboat there. And the lake was fed by natural springs. And those springs were actually harnessed through underground pipes so that it was possible, when special dignitaries were coming or when there was a special occasion, that a certain valve could be turned and there would be a beautiful fountain of water all over the campus. So it was quite an impressive sight, all through the courtesy of the water in that lake. Now that water is being funneled out underneath the parking lot, and no more fountains on the lawn. The Waites had a beautiful scheme for the decor of this entrance hall, because it was a combination of gold and black. As you will see, the floor is black Vermont marble. And in the floor, you will see what look like scratches, but are actually fossil remains. And there is one, and another one has the actual contour of the sea shell, which was embedded in the sand before the marble was formed. Above the black marble floor, on the ceiling, is the gold leaf applied over the entire surface of the archway over the foyer. And you will see how the gold and the black of the decor is extraordinarily beautiful in actuality. And then if we come in from the foyer, we turn here, and this originally was the withdrawing room for the Waite family. But as you can see, we are now using it as a chapel. But in the early days of the college, the very first and second and third year, because it was the largest room available to us, we used it for a library. The librarian's desk was over there, and all the tables were lined up here. And as we move farther beyond to the solarium, we will see where the periodicals and where the girls could sit comfortably and read. So we'll move out to the solarium, and I'll show you what a lovely room that is, still today. And from the library, we move into this beautiful solarium, which was used as a transitional area, as you'll tell by the lattice work, from indoors to outdoors, because all the French windows open, and it faces southeast. So it was a beautiful exposure for the sun. And in this room, we used it particularly for a periodical room and for the encyclopedias and so on, and also a seating area for the students to study. Now, this particular fireplace is beautifully carved, and it is repeated, in a sense, in each of the bedrooms upstairs, with some variation in style. But all of the fireplaces are workable with gas or with the logs that are available. And sometimes we use one, and sometimes we use the other when it got a little chilly. We've just come from the library behind me, across the hall, into what was originally the dining room. And in the dining room there is a white marble floor, and at the head where Mrs. Waite sat, there was a button on the floor that she could push, and then that would summon the butler without her having to do so. And he would come in from this door and say, "Did you ring, ma'am?" And then he would do whatever she said to do. But for us, this was the chapel, and the altar was in front of this place. But now, as you can see, we use it for a sitting room, and you will see a portrait there of a very important person, because this is the foundress of the Franciscan sisters, and her name is Mother Magdalene Daemen. Notice the name. And she is the one who actually started with a very small community of people who were interested in her mission of teaching and serving the poor and so on. And so that now our sisters throughout the United States are indebted to her for founding this particular Franciscan community. And it is this community that founded Rosary Hill College, according to the Franciscan impetus given us by Mother Magdalene. Now, in that first year of the college, there were 7 sisters who were here. And I'd like to tell you about them because I think it's interesting to see that they were not only, many of them, administrators, but they were also teachers, and that's something unique in present-day colleges. For example, Mother Alphonse Kampshoff was the president, but she also taught German. And then Mother Gonzaga Miller, who was the academic dean, was responsible. Well, she had her PhD in science, and so she taught biology. And then Sister Miriam Reinhardt also had her PhD in psychology, and she taught psychology, and she was also the librarian. So we have Mother Alphonse teaching German, who was the president of the college for 5 years, Sister Gonzaga Miller, who was the academic dean, who also taught science, Sister Miriam Reinhardt, who had her PhD in psychology, who was also the librarian. And then Sister Innocencia had her degree in history, and she was the registrar. So 4 of those 7 were administrators as well as teachers. And then there were 3 others, Sister Magdalene Spalding, who taught Spanish, Sister Brendan Bradley, who taught music, and I was also there teaching art. So that makes 7 of us. Now, in the community, there were actually 8 here. Perhaps of most important person was the person who kept soul and body together and alive and energetic, and that was Sister Devota, because Sister Devota prepared all our meals for the sisters, as well as providing a hot lunch with homemade desserts every day for the students down in what was originally the Rumpus Room, or the cafeteria, for them. So that is the group of sisters who actually founded the college, Rosary Hill College, in the footsteps of Mother Magdalene Daemen. Now, you'll wonder about the name Daemen. In the late 60s and early 70s, when the college became non-sectarian and also co-educational, it was deemed inappropriate to have the name Rosary Hill. So they were looking around for a name that would be more non-sectarian, and they came up with the name Daemen. Now, not too many students, or other people as well, know that the name of the college presently is from the family name of the founders of the Franciscan sisters. Her name was Magdalene Daemen, and she lived in Holland. And it's the name Daemen that we used first to build a small cement block building, which is now the little theater. And then it was transferred to the entire college. So that name change also gives tribute to Mother Magdalene Daemen. Now, while we're talking about that, I'd like to say something also about the academic program. Sister Gonzaga, the academic dean, was really responsible in great measure for the beginnings of the college and also for its continuity. And she is the one who secured the charter at first and then was the spearhead for all the other things that actually followed from that. And in addition to that, I wanted to say something also about the students. She is the one who drew up the list of courses and the first college catalog and that sort of thing. And when we're talking about the academic program, you would have no idea what the tuition was that first year for the students who were here. Now remember, they were all commuters. It was $300, which is quite a change from the 3- and 4-figure numbers today, especially if you are a resident student, so on. So that is the story of the Daemen from Mother Magdalene Daemen, our foundress, and the foundress of the Franciscan sisters who were serving here for and in complete charge of the college for at least 28 years. The Board of Trustees, there were 5 sisters on the Board of Trustees, and then there were 8 lay members. Whenever we needed any course taught, we would invite a lay person who was qualified to add to the roster of 7 teachers that were on the faculty. So that takes care of that very early year when we were so few, but still walking in the Franciscan footsteps of Mother Magdalene. We are just leaving the foyer now and going up the stairs, and I want to tell you an interesting thing about those early days here at the college, because according to community regulations of the sisters were not permitted, according to those regulations, to attend weddings. So the students were very concerned that we should see their wedding party, and so usually, immediately after the church ceremony, the whole entourage would come and meet all the sisters. We'd all go out in front of the building and wish them well. And then the bride and groom and the bridesmaids, whoever they might be and so on, came in, and they would stand here and have a formal portrait made with their train spread out over the stairs and looking very beautiful. And for some of them, it saved them the cost of having formal portraits made. And so that was a very interesting experience for all of us to be able to see the graduates and their entourage. Now we're going to go upstairs and see the office, formerly a bedroom, the office of the joint office, I should say, of the president and the academic dean. So if you will follow me, we will go upstairs. And so we're moving up to the second floor, the original 3 bedrooms that were actually used as our first classrooms. But then in particular, I wanted to show you one room, which is the shared office of the president of the college and the academic dean, both of them functioning at the same time in the same small room. And this is the room. On one side is the desk where the academic dean sat, and between the 2 windows was another even smaller desk where the president of the college sat and did whatever work she had to do. So working together like this, it was the only space that we had, and they got along very amicably. This is a corner of one of the bedrooms that was used as a classroom. Because it was the largest bedroom, it was Mrs. Waite's bedroom, it served the purpose of a general classroom where the English and history and all the academic subjects were taught. So this is one of those beautiful fireplaces that we spoke about downstairs, and then if you will look over to the right, that is the entrance to the Solarium, and that was used as our painting studio during those first years. Between the general classroom and the art studio, there was hanging on the wall a painting about that big. And behind the painting was a wall safe, and this was where Mrs. Waite kept her jewels. And it opened, and the date on the lock is 1903. So it's a very old one, but in the course of time, of course, everybody plays with it, and no more jewels are there. So, this is the passageway that the students would take in order to get down to their cafeteria and also to the kitchen beyond that. But before we go there, I'd like to point out this beautiful wallpaper which Mr. Waite bought in China and thought it so beautiful because it emphasizes the gold and the black and fits so well with the decor of the foyer. So if we move, you'll notice even on the glass panels, it's a black doorway with the gold trim. And that's the same with the stairwell with the gold carpeting. So we'll go through this the way the students did in order to get to the cafeteria. So this is the door that led to the cafeteria. There's a winding staircase that leads down to that place. And then beyond this is the door that leads to the kitchen. Now, an interesting feature of this door, it's one of 3 other doors that have a bolt that can only to lock the door. And only the Waite family could manage the bolt from this side. So if they went away for vacation, all they had to do was to bolt these doors. The maids would then stay on their part of the building and take care of the furnace and the hot water and everything else, all the utilities. And the family did not need to worry about the maids, having hijinks in the family rooms. So we'll go through this. This is the bolt on the door, but we'll go through this to the kitchen. We're passing through the butler's pantry now, and then beyond that is the kitchen itself. And there are a couple of interesting features in the kitchen that I would like to show you the details. And I wanted you to see the walk-in icebox. This is a good old-fashioned icebox, kept cool and chilled by ice that was delivered daily. Now it has been electrified so that the refrigeration is more constant. But I'd like to show you where they put the ice, because this is a section for the ice. So if you'll just follow me, I'll show you right around the corner in the maids' quarters where the ice was located. And this is the back stairway. You can tell the stairs for the maids was not as ornate as the stairwells in the front. But this is the place where the iceman would come in the back door, and with the ice over his shoulder, would unlock this and put the ice in, and on the other side is the refrigerator that I showed you before. So this is the place where the ice would be inserted into the wall so he would not have to disturb the maids. And this is the intercom before the electronic age, so that in the kitchen any message could be given to any room in the house, in the Waite house, and they could call in also and say what was wanted, and say, I'll have tea now delivered to the solarium. And then the maids would bring up the tea. Now in every room there is a matching button that would indicate, for example, if the lady were entertaining and she decided it was time for tea earlier or later than planned, she could merely go over to the door and press a little button unobserved, and the tea would come automatically. Would you like to see that little button? Okay. Now we're standing at the entrance to the dining room. And if you wanted tea served or any special service at all the lady of the house would have to do would to be punch this little button. That would ring in the kitchen, and the maids, did you ring, ma'am? And that would be it. So there is one of those in every strategic spot in the building, so that the lady of the house could keep in touch with her servants and with the service which she wanted provided. We're just walking now out of the kitchen and coming into what was originally the maids' dining room. This was a solid wall across here, and the table was lengthwise. Now in that maids' dining room, that served as our first dining room as well. But then when there were more sisters added, we had to break out this wall and add an extension to the building here. But even in that extension, we divided it into parts. And this was a solid wall all the way across, and this whole area then was opened up for the sisters' use. And then on this side of the wall, the chaplain sat in solitary grandeur and had his meals served here. In the course of time, because there were so many sisters, The chaplain eventually moved over to what is now the little theater, his quarters over there, and then all of this was used then by the sisters for their cafeteria and for their dining room. Now, the furniture in here is the original furniture, tables and chairs in Duns Scotus used for the students. And after they got new equipment and new furniture for that in Duns Scotus, where their dining room was, then the chairs and the tables came here and served us very well. Behind me is the cafeteria, and adjoining the cafeteria is the fruit cellar, which you see here. And this fruit cellar was the first ceramic studio that we had for the young art students who were at the college. Here were two very small kilns for doing the very small things which we did. And then later we progressed to another studio which was larger in another place on campus. But another room that is very interesting that we used to good effect was the wine cellar. And they were very careful that the wine should be protected by a safe, and a very sturdy safe to be sure. The wine was stored here, and only Mrs. Waite and the butler had a key to this particular wine cellar. Now, in this room, the only room in the whole building that didn't have windows was the room that we could use for photography. So this was our photography studio. At the same time, we were using the wine cellar to good effect. But it was a very small room, and very easily we absorbed all the oxygen in it and had to come out for ventilation. But that was our first photography studio. Now we have a fully equipped studio for photography. I hope you've enjoyed this short tour of Rosary Hall when the college was Rosary Hill. It was a building that served its purpose well for those beginning years. So this is Rosary Hall, where it all began. Our first president, Mother Alphonse Kamshoff, remained in office from 1947 until her death in 1953. When Sister Angela Kanavan was appointed to succeed Mother Alphonse in June 1953, a new era of expansion and building was begun. As you know, the heart of any college is its library. And just 2 years after Rosary Hill graduated its first class in 1952, Marion Library was built. At first, this building not only housed the library, but also provided space for 3 temporary classrooms on the mezzanine floor, where the stacks are now housed. Below the main floor of the library, the large open area, which we called Marion's Social Room, served as an all-purpose room for parties and for the frequent dances that were held. It was only 2 years later, in 1956, that the sisters purchased the Copeland estate, which adjoined the college property along Main Street to Gettsville Road. This was a 2-family residence, and it was easily adapted to become the first women's dormitory on campus. Originally, it was known as Alverno Hall. It was recently renamed Curtis Hall in honor of Patricia Curtis, who was in the first class of graduates of Rosary Hill College, and later she became academic dean of Daemen College. 2 years later, in 1958, the main or western section of Duns Scotus classroom building was erected. The library complex is at the far left. In addition to classrooms, science laboratories, and faculty offices, there was a fully equipped dance studio under the direction of Sini Rothier. Ballet was offered to the students in lieu of a state requirement of physical education. Also on the ground floor of this building was a large student and faculty cafeteria. It served also as a student lounge. With the growth of our resident population on campus, a 4-story residence hall for women was begun 2 years later, in 1960. This is Kanavan Hall as we know it. Originally, it was known as Lourdes Hall and housed 168 women students in 40 suites. On the ground floor was a student lounge on the left hand, and on the right, a cafeteria and kitchen. And just 3 years after Kanavan was built, Sister Angela negotiated the purchase of 10 campus apartment buildings alongside the eastern edge of Rosary Hill campus. 13 more apartments were purchased in 1966, a total of 23 buildings of 4 family apartments. At peak capacity, these 23 apartment buildings could house approximately 500 students. And then, when the college officially became coeducational in 1971, the residential needs of both women and men could now be met. Even while negotiations were being carried on for the purchase of these campus apartments, Sister Angela was dealing with architects to complete the construction of Duns Scotus Hall by adding the East Wing in 1966. Originally, this was called the Fine Arts Wing because the 2 lower floors of this building consisted of specially equipped studios for sculpture, painting, graphic arts, photography, and so forth. 10 fully equipped studios with an equal number of full-time faculty. The upper 2 floors of this wing consisted of tiered lecture halls, faculty offices, and classrooms. This is Duns Scotus Hall as it is today. The longer west wing is at the right. The shorter Fine Arts Wing at the left. And beyond Duns Scotus, at far left, several of the campus apartments can be seen. But Sister Angela was not finished. 1 year later, in 1967, the Charles J. Wick Student Center was erected. It provided space for student activities, a large cafeteria, a snack bar, and an alumni lounge. This is a drawing of the campus as it was pictured in the Rosary Hill College catalog of 1974, just 1 year after Sister Angela retired. She had served 20 years as the 2nd president of Rosary Hill College from 1953 to 1973. Now you might well ask at this point, how did a small group of Franciscan sisters under the aegis of Sister Angela Kanavan ever have the foresight, the courage, and the energy to plan and to build, in less than 15 years, 5 major buildings on campus, and to purchase the Copeland Estate for a dormitory, and 23 4-unit campus apartment buildings? How was this possible? One significant reason is that the Sisters of St. Francis on the administration and faculty of Rosary Hill Daemen College never received a paycheck as salary. The money each one earned was returned to the treasurer of the college as contributed services after minimal living expenses were deducted. Even as more sisters joined the faculty, this practice continued until 1984. That is, all during the first 36 years in the history of Rosary Hill Daemen College. But of course, the sisters were not alone in their support of the college. In addition to very generous laypersons who responded to our fundraising efforts, There was a marvelous network of our Franciscan sisters throughout the United States, hundreds of sisters, who rallied to our call for help. For many years, they devised ingenious methods of fundraising for the benefit of the college. This was genuine sisterhood, an important part of the legacy of the Sisters of St. Francis of Penance and Christian Charity. Our legacy to the present and to the future students of Rosary Hill, Daemen College. And all of those women who were students here and graduated have taken with them a spirit and an esprit de corps that is unique because they were Rosary Hill girls, and now we welcome them to the Daemen community.